America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Jordan Bruneau, Vice President at Job Creators Network.
And I'm Toni Angelini, Senior Vice President at Job Creators Network.
Please subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Today, we're joined by Carolyn Moore. Carolyn's the Vice President of Parents Defending Education and has worked for several nonprofits, including the Federalist Society and the Mercatus Center. Additionally, she's worked for the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs at the White House and the Republican Attorneys General Association. Today, she's here to discuss Kamala Harris's education plan and praise of Randy Weingarten. Caroline, welcome to Main Street Matters.
Thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So maybe you could just start off by telling us a bit about your group, Parents Defending Education, and what you all are working on, a little history for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Our founder started our organization during COVID. Her kids were coming home from school, and she was a little worrisome about the things that they were learning in the classroom or also not learning. And she decided to start our organization because she thinks that, there needs to be more parental involvement in the classroom. And so she started this organization about 2 years ago. And we have a network of parents from all over the country. We have also people in the community who can submit tips. Everybody can submit tips online to our website and kind of help us understand what's going on in the classroom. If they have questions about, gosh, my kid seems to be talking a lot about their feelings, but can't add 1 + 1, then we kind of do some looking into that and do FOIA requests and figure out what exactly kids are learning in the classroom and how parents can work with teachers to be an asset to, get their child to the next rung on the ladder of education.
Yeah, I mean, the COVID pandemic, really exposed so much. I don't know where you're based. I'm in Michigan now, but at the time I was in Los Angeles. And it's funny, the mainstream media talks about how schools were closed for a year. But actually in Los Angeles and most of California, they were closed for 2.5 years, all the way from March 2020, when the pandemic broke out, until late August 2022. So during that time, so many parents were able to see exactly what their kids were learning or not learning, as the case may be. Can you just describe a little bit more about that period and what your members saw and how that's really motivated them to fight for better educations for their kids?
Oh, absolutely. I think that this is something that, isn't just specific to one area or another. I live in the DC area. And I think that it was the first year during COVID that they graduated every senior in public school. And it's, you would say, oh gosh, that's so great. Everyone's graduating. But no, they're just letting the kids graduate. It's not as if there was an achievement or they passed tests or their scores were so great that, it's just such an academically bright group. It's just that they were kind of, milking kids through the process and just graduating them. And yeah, that's what our parents saw. And so we've encouraged parents to find like-minded people in their school districts. And sometimes that's hard. But some parents, find like-minded people through their churches or through their kids, athletics teams. Just find people who are thinking what you're thinking and try to, piecemeal what is missing in this equation. And so through our FOIA requests and through our network of parents and community members, we found out a lot of things. For instance, there are 20,000 school districts in this country that we found so far that have parental exclusion policies. Now, this is a policy that, a child can transition behind the backs of their parents with their teacher's help and the parent's not involved. So that could be something like, if the child's name is Alexandra, going by, Alexander in the classroom and a parent has no idea, And it also goes to the bathroom situation. So you could have a child who is a biological female going into a biological male bathroom. And as a parent, you don't know. And so our firm belief is that parents need to be equipped with the tools to help their kids succeed, whether it's in the classroom or honestly just socializing in the school districts. And so that's what we're here to do. Going back to, back to school type things, I think parents need to be thinking about opting their kids out of social and emotional learning. Those type of quizzes that go on, ask the kids how they're feeling 100 times throughout the day, which is, I think it's good to know, be in tune with your feelings. But if it comes at the cost of learning to read and write, I think that's problematic for everyone involved.
That I'm cracking up when you're talking about the kids having their feelings, having their emotional temperatures taken. Back to COVID, for organizations that are so concerned about feelings all the time. I had 3 kids in high school who were basically in bed in hoodies for 2 years. Nobody cared about their feelings when they were trapped inside their bedrooms and not able to go to school. I'm in New Jersey, so like Jordan and like yourself, I'm in an area that was we were sort of the first to close and one of the last to open. And my children lost really, all children lost out. My kids happen to be in high school, and those years are very formidable. And I continue to see amongst my kids and their friends some of the downstream impact that the closures had on them. Not even talking academically, but emotionally. And it's very difficult for me to sort of accept the premise that at the end of the day, our public education system is here purely to advocate for the children, because I think the COVID pandemic was a great example that a lot of the times the public school system is only advocating to keep itself going. And Randy Weingarten, the head of the Education Association, is the tip of that spear. Talk to us about sort of what your organization has seen in terms of what the Education Association is doing behind the scenes. And then, how can parents advocate purely for education and to get a lot of this soapbox stuff out of the mix?
Yeah, those are great questions. So like what you said, Randy Weingartner, I can't imagine that she could even get in front of a stage and talk to people about the great things she's done to help students, because we all witnessed, whether it was, you have a neighbor kid who's in kindergarten and still can't, hasn't mastered the English language, or a high schooler who has so much anxiety about going to college because they just haven't been in a classroom for so many years. I think it hurt kids all across the board. And I think she should be embarrassed. And instead, she's empowered. And Kamala Harris went and, was so proud that that's the first union that supported her. And I think that it's telling that their sense of desperation that they had to be the first ones to support her. They need someone like her in to allow their political elements to continue. I don't think that they're advocating for the best education for students, or I don't think that they're advocating for parents to be involved at all. I went through the resolutions that they passed during that meeting last week. And in comparison to last year, where they had, I think, 7 resolutions, and these things are highly political. This year, they passed 44 resolutions that have to do with a ceasefire in Gaza and how are we supporting newcomers and those sorts of things that are highly political and are honestly international affairs. They have nothing to do with public schools here. I don't think that public schools are in a place to be helping newcomers when they can't even have citizens who, can read. I think we need to be worried about our own kids that are already enrolled in schools and how we can help them. And so anyway, I think that she should be embarrassed. And I think that it was really, yes, I think she's done other things that aren't great, but I think like what you said is COVID was definitely the telltale sign that I think the unions are grasping for straws and just they need the teachers on board, because what they're pushing has nothing to do with school. It has nothing to do with getting kids to grade level reading and math and everything that they need to succeed in this world, and instead pushing somewhat of a social agenda and most definitely a political agenda. A lot of the things that were also passed in these resolutions have to do with LGBTQIA students. And yes, we need to advocate for all students, but we need to be advocating for all students is the baseline, and their education. We don't need to be singling out certain students and advocating for them, or really keeping teachers out of the classroom by, working for vacation days and that kind of stuff. We need to figure out what the teachers need, resources in the classroom that can aid them to teach children and work with parents and all work together to get kids up to snuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We in New Jersey, the New Jersey Education Association somehow many years ago got it passed that teachers in the state of New Jersey are required to pay dues to the NJEA, even if they are not members. They are forced to basically fund a program that, you're right, has a platform that has very little to do with teaching a lot of the times. But you have these same teachers who are having to buy their own school supplies because their needs are not being met within the classroom. So clearly, the education system in America is in need of dire help. One of the proposals that Kamala Harris has put through is on funding the HBCUs. She's got, I believe, billions of dollars, a proposal that, she basically wants to seek out these schools specifically to be able to receive this aid. How does your organization perceive that proposal? And why just HBCUs?
That's a great question. We really only work in the K-12 space. But I know that, there are grants across the board. And I think that every university should have the same chance to receive grants and whatnot. It shouldn't be specifically based on, how the school identifies or the particular subset of the population that goes to these schools. I think everybody should have the same opportunities.
Yeah. I thought it was really ironic last week. Kamala Harris launches her campaign launch video. It's all about freedom. She's trying to co-opt that term from people on our side. And then at the same day, she goes and gives a speech to AFT, which is the biggest barrier to education freedom in the whole country. I mean, you just can't make that irony and hypocrisy up. Earlier this year, Job Creators Network.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Earlier this year, Job Creators Network founded the Education Freedom Alliance with ALEC and the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. And our goal with that is to push universal school choice in as many states as possible. We're aiming for 25 states to pass universal school choice education scholarship accounts by the end of next year, to end of 2025. We have about 12 so far. Where does school choice, education freedom, education scholarship accounts play in your organization, your efforts, and how do you see it as a part and parcel of reforming education?
We don't specifically work on school choice, but I have been in the movement, the center right movement, for the last 13 years. And I really love to see the change and the progress that has been made. I mean, I remember when it seemed like it was a pipe dream that oh gosh, kids will be able to go to school and parents will have the choice to send their kids, get them to a better education, whether it be, a school across town or whatnot. And with these vouchers and credits, I think that these are wonderful things. And I think everyone should have access to those, definitely. I think we're up to over 20 states now. And so that's just wonderful. I do think it's telling. One of the resolutions for the AFT was that they want to shut down school choice and voucher systems and stuff like that. And I think that that's such a, like you said, a barrier to entry. I think that if you're an organization advocating for students and freedom, just like you said, that this is exactly the kind of freedom that everybody would want to be happening with their own children or their neighbors' kids to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, everybody knows American education is broken. I mean, you look at our test scores, 25% reading proficiency among minorities. Unless you're lucky enough to be born into a good zip code, you're really stacked against it. But Democrats seem so willfully blind to this. And my only analysis is because the teachers' unions are one of their largest donors. So it's a back scratching exercise that mutual back scratching exercise. Democrats will prevent any type of change that could threaten the unions, any type of reform that could allow people greater choice or diminish the unions in favor of the students. And then in return, Democrats fund or unions fund the Democrats' campaigns. How do you agree with that symbiotic relationship? And then how do you think we can eventually disrupt it so the student is put first rather than the union?
I think that the best way for this to happen, yes, I know there's lots of talk about, getting rid of the Department of Education or, different things like that. But I think that unfortunately, that's going to take a lot of change, and as we all know in public policy, everything takes a very long time. So we really advocate for parents to get involved in their communities and, change over your school board. And then you guys can, have a curriculum that is, a classical education. Give school districts choices between different curriculum. And I think that can help students. You should also know, what does your assembly person stand for? What's happening, in your state regarding Title IX? I think there are lots of things that parents can do on an individual level to educate themselves. And we try to do that. So that, they can make a difference in their community. Because I think if we sit here waiting around for politicians to change the game, I think we'll be waiting for a very long time. But I do definitely think that unions are not advocating for education. And I don't think that they're advocating for teachers either. I mean, like you said, with the, the lack of teacher resources in the classroom, they can't even afford, pens and paper and markers and whatnot for their students to, creatively learn. I think that is such a sad thing. And it's very true. I donate to those things every year. But I think that the union should be supporting the teachers and the students. And since that is not happening, there's clearly a gap. And so I think that's where we come in and other parental rights groups come in. And if you can't change it in your community, then school choice and vouchers are a great option for you. Get out and do the best thing for your child because you want your kid to succeed.
You mentioned Title IX. That is something very personal to me. My daughter is leaving tomorrow for preseason soccer camp in college as a freshman, and it's a very difficult, personally speaking, it's been a very difficult thing to sort of navigate because as a parent, we obviously raise our children to advocate for what they believe in. But these schools have a certain stranglehold over their athletes. And as Riley Gaines has told repeatedly, she went through a lot when she tried to speak up, politely speak up. Mm-hmm. And so what does your organization, what do you recommend for parents to do that want to be able to address some of these issues without causing, huge backlash for their students?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're currently in litigation on Title IX. And so we think that, no school should have to comply to this. No school district should have to comply to this in the K-12 space or in higher ed. I mean, I think in higher ed, it's almost, more of an issue because, it gets the more competitive these sports get, I mean, the more dangerous it is. And I think it's defying truth and fact. And so if you're telling your student to be, polite, and I think girls honestly fall into this category more often than not, but try to be polite and, kind of speak up a little bit, but, you don't want to upset anybody or ruffle feathers or whatever. I kind of think that time has passed. If you need to advocate for yourself, you need to advocate for privacy in a locker room or on a sporting field. If you don't feel comfortable playing against a biological male, I think you need to speak up. And I think we're in a weird time right now where everything seems a little fluid. But hopefully we'll have, it starts August 1st, I guess, is when it goes into effect. A lot of states have like injunctions and whatnot. But in the next week, we will definitely see what's happening. But the best thing that we've told parents to do is, for back to school kind of night or for orientation for college kids, you need to ask the school like where they stand, especially if your child is an athlete. But since it affects private spaces, I think it really affects every child. It affects boys too. And so as in accordance to like due process and whatnot and higher ed with, sexual harassment and stuff like that, it'll impact boys. But I think that you need to ask, like, what is your policy? Like, what is happening? You need to ask direct questions and figure out, how to explain this to your child. Because I think it's really hard in a lot of families, because I talk to parents all the time who say, gosh, we go to church on Sunday and we believe this as a family, but we send our kids to school and we tell them that's what you believe, but only say that at home. And I think that's such a sad thing because you're telling your child to not believe truth and fact, and instead hide who they are. And I'm not saying, do anything dramatic or anything like that, but I think that kids need to know, going into the school year, are things going to look different for them? And if you don't feel comfortable, and unfortunately, a lot of schools have adopted these policies where the transgender student is the one who gets to do what they want to do, and the female who doesn't feel comfortable is the one who needs the accommodation. I think that's odd. But if you feel uncomfortable, then heck yes, go to the nurse's bathroom. Like every child should feel comfortable, especially, ones who are in middle school and high school and things are weird in a bathroom. You know what I mean? You feel uncomfortable about how you look and who you are. I sure as heck wouldn't want to be sharing a restroom with, anyone other than my biological sex. So we just tell parents that, you need to figure out what's going on and explain it to your child before they go back, because things might be different, or a lot of schools have already adopted these kind of policies. Yeah, so we are joined with Independent Women's Forum and an organization called First, which advocates for free speech on college campuses. So our organizations and our members, alongside the attorneys general from South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, and Georgia, we're all in a lawsuit against the Biden administration. And we're still waiting to hear back from a judge. And so hopefully we'll have, kind of orders with, how things will proceed. And, as it is going to be August 1st soon, we hope that we will hear in the next day or so. And figure out how to proceed. But the goal would be that, students in these states would not have to, or school districts, I guess, in these states wouldn't have to comply.
Got it. Caroline, can you give our listeners just a few horror stories, what you're finding from some of these FOIA requests? What's actually going on? You hear all this stuff about bad stuff in the classroom. I'd love a few examples of what you found from your FOIAs.
Oh, yeah. No, we found a lot of things. I think for a time this spring, there were issues. People were wondering, well, gosh, it's so strange that the LGBTQ flag is flying above our school and not an American flag. And so in those instances, you file a FOIA and figure out, well, gosh, why is that? And there seems to be this universal truth, I guess, in public schools that the LGBTQ flag is the one that is representative of all, not the American flag. And so we found that very troubling. We also have seen that, I guess when I went to public school, we learned like in health class, like, I don't know, in high school or something like that. Maybe you have like a puberty class when you're in, end of elementary school, but then in high school, health class. Well, it seems like, as you've seen probably elsewhere, they're bringing this into like first and second grade classes and teaching kids in relation to like a gingerbread man And, oh, it's so normal. And it's just normalizing things for kids that are overly sexualized and shouldn't be normalized. We've heard about like, having period parties, which is just like a very strange way to, I don't know, I guess everyone becomes a woman, or, all females become a woman, but I can't imagine. A lot of our lawsuits deal with free speech. And so I guess something really concerning to me specifically is how a lot of these school districts have harassment policies and codes of conduct that I guess I would assume are, a handful of pages. They're very overbroad. And these policies, a student can be punished anything up to being expelled for using an incorrect pronoun of a transgender student. And I just can't imagine that that is a thing, but it is. And they also have policies where if you would write a text message on a phone that's like outside of school and you would use someone's incorrect pronoun, apparently the schools think that that is, their right and their property, that they can bring that up and also punish a student. So I think that's very concerning territory to go into. I file a lot of civil rights complaints. And those deal with affinity groups. And so we've seen, they have groups that are just for Hispanic boys who want to do STEM. Whereas I think, it's against the law, but also every student should be able to learn about STEM if they want to learn about STEM. When I was in school, we had classes that were like, or groups that were like drama or like, science geeks or whatever. And that's great, but they're inclusive. And so now I think we're seeing across the board that a lot of these affinity groups are exclusive, which is, concerning. So those are kind of trends we're going to see in the next year or so.
Interesting. Wow. Caroline, I'm sure you've had this response. Yeah. Every time I talk to a liberal or a leftist and I mention what's going on in the schools and how kids aren't being taught, and I bring up proficiency scores, I bring up all this data, the response is always the exact same. We need to fund the schools more. The schools are underfunded. It's basically every single time I bring it up with a liberal, that's the response I get. And they point to teachers' baseline salaries without benefits, and they might point to a couple other things, but that response is always the same. How do you respond to that argument? Oh, the problem in the schools is they're just not funded enough.
No, I think that's a great question. And that definitely is the response. Yes, I think that people think there needs to be more funding. But if we just look at like the ESSER funds, those were the funds given to schools during COVID. That was an emergency situation. Schools had to be, they all needed new air ducts, or they all needed tablets, or whatever they wanted to spend their money on. And I think just easily pointing to that and saying these schools were given so much money. And here we are 2 years later, and there's nothing to show for it. The kids are still behind. And they're asking for more money. I think, that's never the right solution. Throwing money at a problem never solves it. I think you need to get to the root of the issue and figure out why is it, it seems like it's a top-down approach, that things aren't being handled well at the district level. And so that's what I would point to as the ESSER funding, because that is just like, is such a scheme. I can't even imagine that these schools, didn't help their kids in that time of need.
That is a really good point.
Just saying there's no relationship between funding and performance, it seems like. At least that I can tell. I'm no regression analyst, but it's just,
no, that's
it's almost,
absolutely
if there is
true.
a relationship, it's an indirect relationship between funding and performance.
Mm-hmm. And I think, as far as funding goes, I think that all parents want transparency and accountability. Where is this money going? Because there is a lot of money going into these districts, and, teachers aren't getting paid a lot. But I don't think that they go into it for money. They know they're not, it's not a doctor or whatever. They're doing it for hopefully the love of, being teaching kids and, helping the next generation, which I think is the case for nearly everyone. But there is a lot of money being pumped into these administrations. And we looked at like Fairfax County in Virginia, and this school has such a huge budget, but the amount that they're paying to administrators for DEI and this kind of stuff, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's like $300,000 some of these people are making. And when teachers, I don't know specifically how much they get paid in that district, but I mean, when it is so much, the their payment is so much less. I mean, I think you need to be questioning, where is this administrator money going, and is it being spent well? And I think not.
It's certainly a tip of the hand to where the districts find, what they find to be the priority when you look at, the salary discrepancies that way.
Absolutely.
Carolyn, can you just tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and your organization?
Yeah, of course. So defendinged.org is our website, and we have a bunch of back to school resources on there coming into the next month or so. We have some information about Title IX and other, things that maybe you don't know about in your school district. And we also have an email address for parents or concerned people across the country who want to submit tips, maybe have questions about how to deal with an issue in their district, or are worried about curriculum and whatnot. And that's info@defendinged.org. People are welcome to email that. And we have a staff who's more than happy to look into a specific issue, talk with a parent over the phone, or file a FOIA request, because we know parents' time is limited, and so we'd be happy to do any of that so they don't have to.
Great. Well, Caroline, thank you very much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. And thank you to all for taking the time to listen. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. Please subscribe at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be back soon with another episode.